Yes, hello. There you are. I see you out there. Thank you so much for joining today. I'm moving into gallery mode so I can see all of your faces. My name is Brad Wolf. I'm the executive director of Reimagine, and we are honestly beyond grateful today to be in the presence of an, I'll say friend. It may be an overstatement of our newfound relationship, but someone I want to be my friend, Dr. Richard Tedeschi, who's here with us, and I'm going to introduce him in a minute. Really, the father figure, the really a guiding light in the research around post-traumatic growth, and we're going to talk to him about that. If you are just getting here, if you wouldn't mind sharing what's bringing you to this space, we can use the chat button on the bottom of your screen, and I would love to hear from you, where you're dialing in from or calling in from, and what prompted you to join tonight's experience. So let's see if I see anyone doing so. I don't know if chat's working or no, everyone is just in a silent state of non. Aha, here we go. It's all flooding in. Hello, Nevada. Okay, yes. We're here to talk about a subject matter that's going to be, and Carol, thank you for joining us. I lost a child to suicide is why you're here. This can benefit me and people I work with, but mostly tonight is for me. I work in child welfare, and trauma and healing is a big topic. You're getting a sense of why we're here tonight, just briefly looking at the chat. We're going to have a really important conversation, and we're going to get to it now. As some of you may know, Reimagine is a nonprofit organization, and our mission is framed here in a question, which we want to enroll really all of you in. And if you're here, you're interested in this. How might we help all people, including ourselves, face mortality, face loss and adversity, and channel the hard parts of life into meaningful action and growth? It's a really big question, and it's something that we're excited to explore and to try to bring forward into the world through our work and through this community that we're building together. So thank you for being here in support of this question. As you may also know, this event is part of an ongoing fall series that Reimagine's producing called Reimagine Grief, Growth, and Action, which is a combination of events that we as an organization are producing and hundreds of events that you in the community are also producing and creating for your own communities or for the public. So if you go on our platform, you'll see tons of events that you have submitted and are hosting yourselves. I'm grateful to be the host this evening. And just to orient ourselves on Zoom, for those of you who need a little tutorial, tonight we are excited to offer, as we always do in these, closed captioning, which could be helpful for some of you out there. If you click the closed captioning button, or the live transcript button rather, at the bottom of the screen, you'll see a running dialogue of all the commentary from tonight's session. Also, for questions and gratitude, we do invite you to use the chat. If you have any technical questions, you can reach out to us in the chat as well. And I do suggest you keeping your camera on if possible, because it makes it so much more human to see your faces. So thank you for those of you that have your cameras on and are able to do so. Really appreciate you. And all of you who can't, appreciate you as well. So also a big thank you to our 2021 sponsors at Reimagine, without whom we could not offer this experience for free. As we've described, we've had thousands of experiences on our platform, and 75% of them have been free of charge because of your support, creating these gateway experiences, and the support of our sponsors. Gateway experiences really into opening up conversations around what matters most in life and also in death and in our adversities along the way. And so with that, I do want to turn it over to a colleague of mine, Derek Hosberg, who is our program director at Reimagine. And every time I want to invite a different staff member of ours, we have a small staff though, to read the intention that's been crafted for the series that really sets up why we're here. And so if you are out there and want to close your eyes for this or just listen and read along with Dara, I invite you to do either one, but these are some nice words that were written by our other colleague Andy here, and a number of us collaborated. So Dara, take it away on our Reimagine intention.
Hi, everyone. There is no life without death, no love without loss, no growth without action. Let's move forward together, not in leaps and bounds, but in small, sweet steps. In the face of distance, illness, racism, and isolation, we are reimagining a changed world, kinder, slower, smaller. We are reimagining the giving and receiving of love, the cycles of loss and new beginnings, and what it means to be fully alive. This is how we move. This is how we transform. This is how we grow. This is how we take action.
Thank you, Dara. And thank you, everyone, for sharing in this intention with us this evening. So we're here. This is a third installment of our series, Phoenix Rising, which is a 5-part series exploring opportunities to emerge from the ashes and transform adversity, loss, and mortality into meaningful growth and action. Our guest speakers are from diverse fields such as psychology, art, and activism, and they help us dig into the scientific phenomenon of trauma-related growth through inspiring conversations and workshops. Tonight we have Richard Tedeschi and Natasha Miller, 2 experts who will provide insight on growing and transforming from trauma and loss, one whose practice is rooted in scientific research and life experience, and the other in the arts and life experience. We'll hear first from Dr. Tedeschi, a pioneering psychologist who will share principles of post-traumatic growth and how he's applied that work with combat veterans and first responders. And then author and performance poet Natasha Miller will perform her poetry, and she'll share how sometimes a story of loss might actually save a life. And at the end, we'll have time for questions. So maybe the slide is a forebearer of what's to come. While you're listening, I'm going to show the slide later again, but be thinking about something you might take away from the session, just one thing. If you can take away one thing, one small action, one small sweet step from this, we'll know that we've really served our purpose here together. So with that, I want to stop sharing my screen and invite in our special guest this evening, Dr. Richard Tedeschi, a professor emeritus in the Department of Psychological Science at the University of North Carolina and distinguished chair of the Boulder Crest Institute for Post-Traumatic Growth. He serves as a consultant to the American Psychological Association on Trauma and Resilience, is a fellow of the Division of Trauma Psychology and the Division of Psychotherapy, and is past president of the North Carolina Psychological Association. And for our purposes as well, to say that you've invited me to call you Rich here. So Rich, thank you so much for being here. But Rich has really transformed our organization, Reimagine, without even knowing him. We've done this work trying to bring people into conversation around the hard parts of life, namely loss and mortality. And we're seeing the responses of people coming to the festivals that we were putting on, seeing people after coming into confrontation with loss and grief, uplifted, transforming their lives and sometimes for the better in ways that we were so shocked. So much beauty and creativity and service was coming out of the work that we were doing. And we started thinking, man, is there a way we could harness this? How do we make this happen for everyone? And in researching that and seeing, is there science behind this? We stumbled upon Rich's work, which is becoming even more prescient during the pandemic, around post-traumatic growth. And it's such an aligned concept that Rich has been spending his many years of his life working on and really introduced to the world. And so, Rich, I just want to thank you so much for being a light for, I'm sure, so many, but also for us as an organization and me now personally.
Well, I appreciate those kind words, and I'm very appreciative that we've got a lot of people here listening to us talk tonight and hopefully gain something from our conversation.
Yeah, so we thought it would be nice really to have a conversation would be the best way to do this. And I invite your questions along the way in the chat. But really want to start out, Rich, if you wouldn't mind grounding everybody in describing What is post-traumatic growth, and how did you come upon it?
Well, post-traumatic growth represents a concept that came out of some work that myself and Lawrence Calhoun at UNC Charlotte did starting in the mid-1980s when we were interested in how people became wise. And what we learned from our interviews with a number of people who had suffered losses and suffered physical disabilities in adulthood, which left them paralyzed, blinded, and such. What we did in listening to all them and doing a lot of other studies of people who had gone through traumas of various kinds is that positive changes can result in the aftermath of these traumas. And we came to label these positive changes post-traumatic growth because we heard the stories of so many people which convinced us that their lives had been really transformed in significant ways, so that they looked upon their experiences as growth experiences where they learned better about who they were, how to live life well, and how to give to others. So our work originated with our curiosity about wisdom and our willingness to listen to people tell their stories to us and learn from them. So I've felt like my career has been basically trying to take what I've heard from people and somehow convey that those experiences to people in my profession and the public in general, so that all of us can learn more about how to move in those positive directions after events that seem so devastating for people.
And so maybe you can describe for us the just the major outcomes of post-traumatic growth that you see, like what, yeah, and these are the principles that I feel, for me, feel like what it means to really live in many ways a full life.
Well, we found that when we interviewed people and we took the bits and pieces of the interviews and kind of chopped them up into their themes and subjected all this to some pretty complicated statistical analyses, actually, that 5 themes came out of these kinds of um, interview experiences and stories that people told us. So there were 5 ways people said that they had changed in significant ways as a result of the struggle with traumatic events. And one way was they had deepened interpersonal relationships. They felt closer to other people, felt more compassionate, more empathic, warmer, that their relationships had changed in ways that were that they valued and were really positive. A second area that they described to us was a greater sense of their own personal strength. People often said things like, if I got through this, I can get through anything. Or they were surprised by how well they had managed in the aftermath of these kinds of events. A third area that people talked about was new possibilities emerged in their lives, that they established new pathways. They were doing things they hadn't done before. They were creating new opportunities for themselves that they found very meaningful. A fourth area was appreciation of life, a greater sense of gratitude, what the important priorities in life need to be. And then a fifth area was spiritual and existential change, where people felt like they had explored more deeply profound questions of what life means to them, what their purpose for living would be, and in coming close to experiences of mortality, they learned more about what it means to be truly alive and human. So these are the 5 areas that people talked about finding themselves changing in. And people are very different in these changes, so that some people would emphasize one of these areas, some people would emphasize several of them. So people are changed in different ways. So this way of living that we call post-traumatic growth looks somewhat different depending on who you're talking to. And I want to emphasize 2 things about it. One is that these changes don't come easily. We emphasize the word struggle. So these things come in the aftermath of struggle. So if people out there find themselves in the middle of a struggle, and they find themselves therefore wondering whether they're on some path that's positive at all, I would tell them, absolutely. Going through these struggles is what often allows you to see things that you didn't appreciate before. And the second thing I want to emphasize about this is that these outcomes, we have to be careful when we use that kind of terminology of an outcome, because it isn't like you reach some destination or achieve growth. You enter into a way of living which allows you to continue to explore these kinds of changes in your life and live them out. It isn't like you arrive at some destination of growth. So that's basically the kind of stories that we're hearing from the people that we're doing our research with.
And so, and we had a chance to talk about this before a little bit about post-traumatic growth being not something that you just move toward and arrive at, but a way of living. And there's also, just to ground folks, it sounds like there's some tried and true or researched, validated ways of moving us closer, or ways of living that if we lived in that way, it would make it more likely for us to experience the type of growth that you explored. Is that correct? Or that you
Well,
explained?
yeah, there's a process of growth that we've found to be commonplace no matter what kind of events people are experiencing. So, we've researched people who have gone through natural disasters, bereavement experiences, combat trauma, serious illnesses, disabilities, all kinds of things. And so no matter what the event is, in the aftermath of the event, the pathway towards positive change is very much the same. It involves a lot of the same elements. So that's something that we have now applied. For example, where I work at Boulder Crest now, Boulder Crest Foundation in Bluemont, Virginia, we try to help combat veterans and first responders who have gone through traumas in their lives, move from their debilitating symptoms and ways of living to something a lot more positive. And we incorporate these 5 elements of this process into our programs there, and we find that it's very useful for people to not only experience these 5 elements of the process, but to understand what they look like and what it's like to go through this process, so that they can help themselves through these phases of this growth process. So I can tell you a little bit about each one of these parts if we want to get into that now. Would that be something we want to do,
I would
Greg?
love that. And maybe to proceed that, as you're describing this, Phoenix asked a really great question in the chat. Are the people that you've worked with and who've been part of the research around this people from diverse cultures and races?
Well, we created a measure of post-traumatic growth for our research purposes, and it's been translated into more than 24 languages. So, for example, we did some research recently in 10 different countries, including, I'm not sure if I can remember all of them, but including Japan, Australia, Nepal, Turkey, um, Peru, Italy. I mean, you get my drift here. I mean, we have looked at people around the world in all sorts of different cultures, and the post-traumatic growth experience resonates across cultures. And in fact, I want to point out that we coined this term post-traumatic growth to describe this, but the experience is nothing new. It's the human experience of response to trauma that's been going on for millennia. And if you look at all the great religious traditions and cultural traditions and literatures, you find the stories of post-traumatic growth in all of them. It's what human beings do in times of great trauma. I mean, if we weren't equipped to do this across cultures, I think we'd be extinct, because trauma would have just wiped us out eventually. But instead, we change and develop as a result of trauma. And that's the case across time and across place.
So with that really powerful answer, curious about, yeah, if you wouldn't mind sharing then those, I'm sure folks are asking, like, how could this actually become something that I can experience if I don't feel like I'm experiencing it right now?
Well, there are pieces to the process. And you know what I did, along with a colleague of mine, Brett Moore, who is a former Army psychologist who works with me at Boulder Crest, we wrote a workbook designed around this so that people could try to um, grasp this process and see themselves through it. So what we said is that first, people have to be educated about the possibility of post-traumatic growth. If you don't know that's out there for yourself and possible, you won't have the incentive to move towards it. So, for example, one part of the education is to emphasize the fact that what makes things traumatic for people is that events challenge their belief systems, their beliefs about who they are, the direction their life is going, what kind of world they live in, their core beliefs about these things that we all carry around with ourselves and we hardly ever think about. But if events call into question your sense of your own identity or your own future or your plan for your life or what kind of world you're living in, whatever event it is, that's traumatic for you. Because if you can't understand those basic things anymore, if you're wondering what the heck is going on, then that's traumatic. That generates a lot of anxiety, a lot of self-doubt, a lot of uncertainty about how to proceed. So education about that is one thing. Also, education about the effect of trauma on us more generally, psychologically and physically, so people can understand what's happening to them as a whole person. And then the second part of the process is to learn some emotional regulation strategies, or learn how to manage their distress so that they're not burdened so much by the anxieties of it and the ruminations people have, the thoughts that they can't get rid of that seem to burden them. If they can gain some traction around those things, then they can feel like they're a little bit more in control of what's happening to them and think more clearly about what direction they want to take their lives. And then the third aspect is to be able to openly talk to people about what's going on, to have some kind of disclosure. And I say talk, but I also mean other means of expression. And I think in your organization, you recognize that the arts are important. So that expression might be through music or dance or other artistic endeavors, but somehow to disclose and express your experience is important so that you don't feel like you're isolated in it. And in doing this, you start to figure out a little bit more about what the impact is on you, what this is all about, and how to think about it. And with that, you can start to put together your own narrative, your story, your understanding of your own life, and not only how you got to the point you're at, but where you might be headed and how to author that story in a direction that you feel is meaningful for you. And the most meaningful thing involves this fifth element, which is service. And that is taking what you're going through and finding some way that can be a benefit to others, and how others can learn from you as someone who's, in a sense, a hero of the traumatic experience. And at Boulder Crest, we work with combat veterans and first responders, and those people are often called heroes. But we emphasize in our work that what makes people heroic is that people are willing to dive down deep into their difficult experiences in life, learn lessons from them, and be able to share what they've learned with other people so other people can be of benefit. That's the hero's journey. And there's a lot written in myth and fable about heroic journeys, and you find that in a lot of literature. You find that in Disney movies, for goodness sakes. So, that's a common theme in human life. And so there's a lot of people who can be heroes, who can bring their experiences to bear on helping other people live lives well. So those are the elements that we're talking about here that involve a post-traumatic growth process.
It's so powerful because I think the work that we're collectively as the community here that's, we hope we're trying to inspire and do together is really a virtuous cycle. I feel like that you're describing that if you go through this experience, sharing can be a part of it. And if the first step is then knowing that this is possible, we can become the conduits through our own growth to help other people know that it's possible. And then therefore, through our storytelling, create really a virtuous cycle of helping one another and elevating our society, hopefully to a place of collective healing, perhaps.
I think that's right. And I want to emphasize that this process is an ongoing process. I mean, we continue, as we're of service to other people, we continue to learn, we continue to be educated, and we continue to learn more about how to manage ourselves. And then we've got more to tell, and we got more to our story. And then we might find ourselves serving even more or differently. I mean, it's a constant process. So, we don't arrive at something. In fact, if we think we've arrived, we're probably not doing all the work that we need to do in terms of our learning about living well, because there's always more to human life than we can absorb in our brief periods on this earth ourselves.
Man, I'm seeing such amazing questions in the chat, and let's take a couple of them now, and then we'll be able to return to some of these later on. And I know you have answers to these questions because I
don't know about that, Brad. Don't put me on that spot where I have answers to these deep questions. So we'll see.
So we talked about. There's a question about PTS, post-traumatic stress, and post-traumatic growth, and can these be experienced simultaneously? And that's from Mark, and I think it's an interesting question.
Mark, yes, and here's why. The stress of traumatic experiences, that's the raw material for growth. I mean, if we don't experience some kind of distress, we have no reason to start to re-examine our core belief system. And if you're not re-examining your core belief system, you're not learning anything new about living life. So the stress of trauma is the catalyst, the starting point for growth. And it's also what keeps it kind of alive and keeps us moving towards growth, because we're still somewhat dissatisfied. we're still somewhat haunted by something. We still have questions. We still realize there's more to be done, or whatever it is, so that stress or distress or discomfort, whatever it is, keeps us moving in this direction of growth. So it's important fuel for the process.
And I see a couple questions in the chat, and I'm wondering, there's a question about how to handle grief on top of grief on top of grief, and there's a question about how does one move from trauma into growth, and then this other question that I found related in some ways is does your model include the body in any way? It's hard to use your mind for these explorations when your body is struggling, and I wonder if I'm going to posit something to you and then get your reaction. That it feels like to me that part of the model that you're describing or the process that you've seen happen in the world is that there's almost a learning by doing the things that you've suggested, or that by those 5 steps that you outlined, by doing acts of service, or there's like a growth by doing, by meditating, by taking these by disclosing, that it's like it seems hard at first, but by doing them, it starts triggering that transformation. And so therefore it is in the body in some way because you have to move to do these things. I don't know. I want to get your reaction to what was coming up for me.
Okay, well, first thing, if we want to focus on the body in this process, probably the place that it's represented most is with emotional regulation, because emotions have physical effects, and that's probably what's bothering us most is a lot of the physical effects, the anxiety of it, the nervousness we experience, or the depression of it, and the lethargy of it, and all those things. So it's certainly trauma is represented in the body in these kinds of ways, all kinds of ways. So we have to learn to regulate our emotions so our body isn't in such distress as well as our minds. So that's part of it. And then getting to your point, Brad, yes, all these phases that we're talking about, education and emotional regulation, disclosure, and the narrative and service, there's action in all of this. If you want to learn and understand, I mean, that's an active stance. If you want to learn better how to manage your own distress and your emotions, there are things you have to do and practice. Disclosure is an active experience, expressing yourself in some way and reaching out to other people, and then telling your story, perhaps, and certainly being of service. All these things involve action.
Thank you. And with that, I think that's the perfect segue to bring on Natasha Miller. Natasha, are you out there? I want to bring you up to this.
Keep going, Brad, with Rich.
Okay. So I guess we'll bring it. I thought it was the perfect segue because Natasha, I'm hoping for her to share some artistic disclosure in the way that you just described, Rich. But this conversation is great, so I'm excited to keep going.
Okay. Well, where should we go next then?
Okay. So where should we go? And I did see her I think I did see her join earlier, Andy, by the way. Just to say, I see your comment from you, but
there's plenty of other questions in the chat if you want to take some more questions from people.
I'm definitely gonna take some more questions. I have my own questions, but I guess I want to be generous. So with that in mind, what is your thought about psychedelic and ketamine therapy and EMDR?
Well, there are different routes to growth that people can have, and I think that there are some ways that people are trying to get there without as much time investment as possible. Try to find the quick routes there. So I imagine that maybe that's what some of the drug interventions like ketamine and psychedelics might involve, and they're also an attempt to help people with their distressing emotions. So ketamine is often used to help calm people. So I can understand that, but that doesn't translate automatically into growth. Those might be helpful for some people along the way so that they can have their thoughts about things and feel calmer in doing so. So that might be helpful.
So
Uh, yeah.
I'm curious, what percent of people, and I know there's what percent of people experience post-traumatic growth just with, I don't know if this is the right term.
Naturally, without
Yeah, I don't know
intervention.
if natural is, I don't even know what the right phrasing of
Well,
that question
hey,
is.
Brad, I was thinking the same thing. We're on the same page because that's what I was about to say. But let's not make the mistake when you talk about the EMDR and ketamine and things like. Let's not make the mistake of thinking that you need to see a therapist and go through some therapy in order to have post-traumatic growth experiences, because people have these experiences all the time without going to any kind of professionals or getting any therapy or any interventions like this. And that's because some people are fortunate enough to have in their environments people who are willing to be what we call expert companions, people who are going to go through this process along with them and encourage them to disclose, tell their stories, try to understand what's happening, who be reassuring partners in this, so the emotions are feeling a little bit more under control, who recognize the possibilities for growth and the value in the person and their experiences, all that stuff. So this happens naturally in life. It can happen with your family, your friends, a coworker, a teacher, a coach, clergy person, whoever. There's a lot of these kind of people out there, thank goodness, because almost all of our research on post-traumatic growth has been done with people who haven't been in therapy. So this is a naturally occurring process that we can help facilitate with some people. But I'll tell you, I don't think we need those kinds of drugs and that sort of stuff. For example, at Boulder Crest, we have a 7-day program that we do with our combat veterans and first responders, which is extremely effective and powerful. And we've done research on it. It shows the growth effects and the lasting growth effects that we have as we support people over time. And we don't use any kind of medication. So it's a naturally occurring process. If you understand it well and you're a good companion, you can facilitate it.
So yeah, I really love how you emphasize what we can do, which is to be that kind of, and I guess it goes both ways, right? We have a relationship with ourselves and we have a relationship with others. And so how do we be an expert companion for ourselves on this journey? And how might we, if we know somebody, how can we be an expert companion for them? And I think you have some resources, which I'm excited, and I think Andy will share out after this as well, and your books too, about how we can be expert companions. I think that work is so important because that's a way that we can show up without a therapist in our own lives to
Right.
be facilitators of this for ourselves and for others. What is the number one thing, I'm curious, that people get wrong when they, maybe the biggest misconception when it comes to post-traumatic growth?
Well, certainly one of the things that I've encountered is people thinking that I'm saying that traumas are a good thing, and that traumas are responsible for growth. And the more accurate way to think about all of this is that what happens in the aftermath of trauma is what we're interested in. Traumas disrupt things. They cause chaos in how people think about their lives. They're seismic events. They're like psychological earthquakes, and they're taking down the infrastructure we live with. Just like an earthquake will take out your electric grid and your roads and buildings and all the physical infrastructure. We got a psychological infrastructure of our beliefs and our understandings of how life goes for us. And traumas take that down, and it's very anxiety rising and chaotic. It's not a good thing. But after that, you have a chance to reconstruct what you do, how you live, how you understand things. It's the reconstruction that is so valuable, and that's what we're emphasizing. So, so we're not saying that people should think about traumatic experiences as good things in their lives. Now, in one of our original interviews with people who suffered physical disabilities in adulthood, in some of those interviews, I did hear people tell me that they were glad they became paralyzed. They say things like that. Some people do. And they said to me, I sat and talked to them. They say, you may think that's crazy or hard to believe, but I'll tell you why. It's because if it weren't for that experience, I wouldn't be where I am now, which is living a much better life, because I learned so much having to deal with that. And I don't think I would have learned it otherwise. And that's why they value the trauma that happened to them. But, when you're talking about your work and in grief and loss, who is going to say, I'm glad that my loved one died? People aren't going to say that. The trauma is not a good thing. So what you do in the aftermath, that's where the difference maker is.
And with that, now is it time to grace us with an example of what we're talking about in this form of artistic disclosure and also the subject matter. So Natasha, are you here now? We would be.
I'm here.
Oh, we're excited. Let's see. For some reason, I don't see you yet in my little view, but I'm about to.
You see me?
All right, there you are, Natasha. Great, thank you so much for joining us. So I'm excited to bring Natasha into this conversation. Really, Natasha Miller is an author, a performance poet, an LGBTQ activist, a film producer, and the founder of Artists in Detroit. She has starred in commercials for Sprite and Shinola. She's been a member of 4 national slam teams and has been a top 5 finalist 3 times for the Women of the World Poetry Slam. Natasha's full-length poetry manuscript, Butcher, was recently published by Button Poetry, and it's dedicated to the loss of her brother, Marcus. And so, Natasha, welcome to this conversation. We've been having an incredible insofar as we've been able to hear from Rich about the science of post-traumatic growth, and wanted to invite you here now to share with us. We've talked about disclosure and sharing, and creativity is maybe a form of that type of disclosure that can be healing for us and also for others. And want to invite you in to perhaps kick it off with something you might share with us in that regard.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that you who booked me know my story of losing my brother in 2013. And I do agree with Rich in a sense of there's something after what you've dealt with, but there's also this part of me that understands as a Black person and a queer person that you shouldn't have to deal with trauma to understand what's on the other side. So that's why this becomes a very interesting conversation. I lost my brother in 2013, and I have literally been living my life based off of that trauma and how I can help people on the other side. And I think that this is one of the first poems that I saw myself on the other side. And it's, if you ask people what's scary about chasing their dreams, most will tell you it's the fear of not making it. But if you ask those same people if they feel like they're making it right now where they are in life, they'll tell you no. Example, after a few bad rounds of karaoke and a few good rounds of whiskey, my friend tells me that everything in her life sucks. Her job, her tiny apartment, her writing career or lack thereof, everything. This woman with scars for knees, testaments of how many times she's hit rock bottom and survived, sits in a bar crying, telling me about her failed life, while at the same time telling me she's still scared of failing, which confuses me, but also makes me question, will we ever start to accept that failure is the sum of all the choices we are choosing not to make and not the ones we made? When my city turned dark into a playground full of ghosts, we stayed, climbed the poles, turned the lights back on ourselves, and made so much noise the rest of the world had to come back to see what was happening 2 days after my brother died. I had to peel myself out of bed to go and teach poems to 10th graders. And a week later, a girl who had just lost her brother left a note on my desk that only read, "Thank you. Thank you." And it was in that moment I understood success is not about money or a bottom line. Success is sometimes just a lifeline between your journey and how your story can inspire or save someone else. Tell me, how many times has winning forgotten your number, and yet you still decided not to make the call, to not pick up the phone and dial yourself into a future you sit at your desk and dream about? Tell me, how many times does morning have to sound like an alarm clock that reminds you that this is not the life I'm supposed to be living, because that life is on the other side of the risk I'm supposed to be taking. That life is on the other side of the bridge I've convinced myself is too shaky to walk across. So yes, chasing your dreams is scary, but it is also more fulfilling than dying with your own story stuck in your throat. Sometimes you have to do what is not easy. You have to put your fist in your own mouth and pull out the words you want this world to remember you by. Leave that tiny apartment of regret. Remember, every chance that you've taken of yourself will catch your fall, and stop waiting. Stop standing still, hoping for the perfect opportunity to find you, because there is no time more important than now. No moment more yours than this one. No person more important than you. Thank you.
Big applause.
All right, so
That was Natasha. Thank you.
So I will say one more before we go into the conversation.
Okay, yo, I mean, yes.
All right.
Keep going.
So the whole book is dedicated pretty much to my brother and me losing my brother, and understanding like how you could find an other side. And my other side was like me pretty much learning how to cook. So this, since the book is called Butcher, is Butcher. To be Grace, to have the butcher turn your chest into a cutting board, to not turn your tongue into a knife, to not cut back, to know that love is a kitchen full of sacrifice, to be sacrificial, to cut and not even know that you are bleeding, to say goodbye every day that you wake up on the farm, to be bored, livestock, to think animal better than monster, to be considered, to arrive to the slaughterhouse still breathing, to watch the butcher prepare to section your body off like a crime scene, to welcome the cleaver, to grin in the face of death, to taste your own blood when it splatters, to fantasize about being dinner, to hope the best cuts make it to the table. Thank you. Thank you, Reimagine. And now it is time for our conversation.
Oh my gosh. Oh, I
Okay.
mean, yeah, it's hard to have a conversation when you feel honestly speechless by such incredible poetry, other than just to say thank you so much, first of all, Natasha, for just gracing us and coming in out of the ether, and in the all of a sudden your screen went. Now I can't see you, but
No, I'm still here.
okay, but we're okay. First of all, just Natasha, where are you?
I am in East Lansing. I have done 3 shows tonight. It's my 3rd show.
And like, are you, because the room you're in, first of all, what you're evoking, it's just, honestly, the backdrop, I have to say, I don't think it's a Zoom backdrop. It just is kind of evoking this like raw power of just.
Which is like Butcher, because I'm actually in a restaurant right now.
Exactly. I was going to say it. I was like, yes. So everything's coming together right now. And, you know, so you lost your brother, and then you went on to create these poems, this book.
Yeah.
How is this? I'm just curious. How is poetry, or this process? Is it to what degree has poetry been important in kind of moving you toward what you shared in the poem, the first poem about following your dreams, or was that something you already were doing? Like, how has it shifted your life since?
I will say that I was already like, in a sense, following my dreams. But after I lost my brother, I started following my dreams in a different way, because I felt like I was following my dreams in a way that I wanted to follow them, but also he wanted me to follow them. And I also used my grief and my trauma as a way to push me forward, because before my brother, I dealt with trauma. And I feel like I would not be the person I am without the trauma that I experienced. And I know that that's like a really like traumatizing thing to say for other people, but I believe in like empathy to its highest degree. And I did not know empathy until I lost my brother, until I dealt with things I dealt with. So I would not be where I'm at right now. I would be successful in some way, but I always question, would it be authentic? Would it be real? Would you actually be to feel? Would you actually understand what other people are feeling if you would not have had these significant losses? And we all deal with losses. I think the difference is some of us take these losses and say, let's do other things with the losses. Like right now, with me being in the kitchen, I couldn't have imagined that 7 years after my brother's death, I would be in the kitchen talking about how my life has transformed because of his death. And sometimes I think to myself, life is on the other side of death. People will die regardless. But who do you become after that happens? And I became somebody else after that happened with my brother. So that's my answer to that. Is just like, I am here because something very significant happened to me. And I am very proud of who I am today. And I can only connect it to what happened to me yesterday.
Wow. I mean, Rich, is there any question? I'm just curious. You don't. I have many, but I'm just wondering, is there any question that's coming up for you that you want to ask Natasha?
Well, Natasha, first of all, you're a great example of how artistic creativity coming out of trauma is so valuable in the world, and how sometimes it takes a poet to be able to frame what it is that the experience is, because often ordinary language doesn't capture it well enough. These experiences are so profound. So I appreciate what you're doing with your work. And I'm wondering if you could say more about the whole process that you went through. I know it's been years, obviously, but how you got on this journey. Um, what was the impetus? How did it start out where you felt like there was something positive that could come out of all of this grief?
Yeah, I think it's been 7 years. And I never thought to myself something positive could come from like me losing somebody who is so close to me. The only thing I thought to myself is that I need to figure out how to navigate through this. If you go to my Facebook page, it's been 7 years. I have a large social media presence. I have not changed my Facebook page presence from like the picture of me, my brother, and my mom, because we were best friends. So I think for me, I didn't think my way through it. I just kind of blindly like felt my way through it. It was like whatever comes next, just kind of comes next. And I'm not out of it. Like last night in my house was the first time that I've dreamt about my brother in like 3 years. And he came to me. And I woke up today feeling so happy that he came to me in my dream and spoke to me in my dream. Me and my brother were 1 year apart in 11 days. We were both Capricorns. We had the same mother, same father. You can never prepare yourself for that kind of loss. And you can never prepare yourself for that kind of ending. So for 7 years, I've literally just like, I've just accepted that grief is not linear. It's not like stages. It's just however it comes, it comes. But sometimes in those stages, grief could actually be happiness. When my brother came to my dream last night, I felt happiness. I felt like, wow, you haven't visited me in 2 years, but you always visit me around the holidays. And that makes me feel happy. And like I don't know how to tell people to go through the stages, because I truly believe there are no stages. And like what you feel is how you feel when you feel it. And I had never felt a death like I felt death other than my brother's. But now 7 years later, it's like I feel it very differently from how I felt it a year ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, 7 years ago. I feel it how it should be felt. And that's very personal to me. And I feel like grief is very personal to every single person in this world. And now I'm just grateful for the small times that I get, which is like, if you visit me in my dreams, that feels like something to me. That feels like happiness more than it feels like death. But 6 years ago, it would have felt like death. And I think that now I get to wake up and choose what grief feels like to me. And I think we all get to choose what grief feels like to us, because it could feel like sadness, but it could feel like something good.
Natasha, I got to tell you, the things you're saying just resonate with me so much. I come from a different background because I'm a researcher and a scientist, and I am a clinician, a psychotherapist. But when you say stuff like grief doesn't have stages, you are so right about that. I mean, that's, I can't remember how many people have come to me in grief and said to me, I'm really worried because I'm not going through the stages of grief right. And I said, oh my goodness gracious,
It's so messy, so messy.
so messy, absolutely so messy and so
Yeah.
individual, just like you say.
Yeah.
And the other thing that you said that I think is so important is what you say about choice. Choosing some part of this process, it's not like it's all just cascading down on us. There is some choice in the matter along the way. And maybe you could say a little bit about the choices that you've made along the way.
Yeah. I mean, I think that it took a long time for me to understand what choosing was. When my brother died, he had a 5-year-old son. And then his mother went to prison for 5 years. She just got out 3 months ago. I had to choose to raise his son. And then to see myself and see my brother and this kid growing up every single day. But the choice that I made was that I'm here for you. I'm not here for me, I'm here for you. And I keep saying, as a Black woman in the inner city, I had to give up a lot of things. I had to give up like touring for my book, touring, doing poetry. I had to say, I have a whole kid to raise that is not my kid. But the choice that I made is this is my brother's kid. And I think that he would have done it for me. The choice that I made is that if my brother was alive, he would make sure his bills is paid on time. He would make sure my mother is well taken care of. He would make sure, because I know him. So I chose to live my life, but also live a life like integrity, which was his life at the same time. But I woke up doing that. And it's not hard as a little sister. It's not hard for me to wake up and think that I lost the best thing that's ever happened to me in my life. But also say, I have to move on, or not move on. I have to continue for other people that were best things in his life too. Because I was not the only thing that was the best thing that happened to him. His mother, his son, the mother of his children, and his sister. So I had to say, how do I pick up the slack? But I chose to pick up the slack. And it's never burdened me, because I feel like I have only been blessed by taking care of people who I know if they had the opportunity would take care of me. I only had my brother in this world. My whole career has been built off of having my brother and then losing my brother. And neither one of these things has ever been a burden to me. I told you, I woke up today and felt like my brother is pushing me into a whole different part of my life. I just raised his son, and I don't have one kid in my life. I think you definitely wake up and you choose, what does grief do to me? And that speaks to your work. What does grief do to me on the other side? It makes me less of who I am, or it makes me a completely different person. And a completely different person doesn't have to be a sad person. It'd be like a good person who experienced trauma. So I love my brother. I wish he was still here to this day. I don't understand a life without him, but I understand that I am only who I am because of my brother being missing in the scheme of things.
Natasha, as I listen to you, I also think about how much you're honoring your brother with what you're doing, not only raising his son, but how you're living your life. It's an honoring, I would think. Is that some way you see it?
Yes, of course. I feel like my whole life, but I feel like me and my brother, when we were alive, we just honored each other. He would say, like, my sister does these things that I can't do, which is not like physical things. And then I would say my brother does things that I can't do. I think my whole life will forever be built on honoring somebody. But that's like religion. You're honoring something in somebody that may not exist to other people, but you want them to feel like you're doing the right thing. So with my life, I want my brother to always feel like I'm doing the right thing. And I might not be doing the right thing, but I may always be doing the right thing for him and I.
One of the things that, hey, Brad, I gotta apologize. I'm taking this over. You should be.
No, I love it. I love it.
I am retired. I am so
Okay.
excited about this.
All right. But I just got to talk to Natasha. I mean, she's amazing. So, Natasha, another thing that I've found to be the case, and that exists in the psychological literature, is the notion of the continuing bond. When people experience grief, one of the scariest parts of it is to lose that person lose that relationship. But actually, people continue their relationships with people who have died.
Hmm.
And we have these continuing ongoing relationships because we still feel for these people. We still have a connection with them. We think about them. Your brother comes to you in the dream. We still have these relationships. Just the other day on November 14th, I sent a message to the sister of my first girlfriend in high school who died when she was 18. And I loved her, and I still think about her and always have. And so there was the anniversary of her death, and I sent her sister a message because we've kept in touch. And this, hey, I'm an old guy. This was decades ago, but I still have a relationship. And I still have a relationship with other people that have died. My father died that same year. And I think of him a lot and have a continuing bond with him. This is
Yeah.
the natural course of events. And I can hear strongly your continuing bond with your brother and how important that is. Your brother is still in your life. He's a presence.
Yeah. I mean, I brought my brother home one day to my house when I bought a new house. And I would drive home every day when he died, and I would listen to Boys to Men in the driveway of my mother's home by myself. I bought a new home, and I said, oh, I got to get my brother's ashes. I bought his ashes home to my home the same day.
Yeah.
And I have a fridge, like a touch fridge. And when I bought all the groceries in his ashes home, a Boys to Men song started playing on the fridge. And I said, oh, my brother is here.
Mm.
But when I looked at my brother in his casket, I said, do not ever hunt me in a physical form, because I'm scared and you're scared. So don't do this to me. So he only comes to me in ways in which he understands that I can receive them. Last night, I said to my friend today, this is the first time in like a year and a half that I dreamt of my brother, and he was like physically talking in my dream. And I was in the same room in my 5-bedroom house that he walked past. I understand now that people come when you need them and people come when you want to receive them. Me and my brother have a real relationship. I could go to bed and be like, not tonight. Don't come. Don't shake a bedroom door. Don't open up a window. And he will respect that and not come. And then I can say, you know what? It's the holidays. I need some money. And he'll say, blessings upon you. You got to understand how you can keep people in your life who have long gone from your life in a physical form. And I would have never known that until right now. Because me and my brother, I feel like we just play games with each other. But the games that we play honors the relationship that we had when he was truly here. He knows what I can handle. He knows what I can't handle. But I know when he's there and I know when he's not there. And when he's there, today I woke up feeling really good. And maybe it's a part of this conversation that we're having right now. Today I woke up saying, my brother hasn't visited me in like a year and a half. And he was actually there in a physical form, and he was actually vocal. And that made me feel good coming into the day. But he always comes around the holidays. And I said, maybe he's just saying, this is my holiday visit. I'm here. And you know, I'm always here, which I couldn't handle from another person. So yeah, I mean, it's the only haunting I will accept. It's the only person I will write a book about. And he knows it. Only person I actually will put up my house too. So.
Well, Rich, first of all, I don't want to, I mean, you're doing a great job. So I honestly, I guess what I would like to ask Natasha, I mean, do you have a question? Rich is doing such a good job. I wonder, do you want to take this job for a second? I'm wondering if you have any questions, do you have a question that comes up for you for Rich?
You know what? I would honestly say, and no one saw it to Rich, I ask so many questions all the time that it actually feels good to just be answering questions. Because the time that I'm in my life, like the holidays, it's very hard for me because my brother passed away in December. So with Rich asking me questions, I feel really good just answering questions. I wish I could think of something, but I have nothing other than just like being able to share the story of like how I feel. And I don't want to make anything up. I just want to say, Rich, thank you. Because these are amazing questions that make me feel validated in my grief and in like my like post traumatization.
Yeah, so I can say this, that see, people want to talk about, well, let me not generalize too much. But I think that most people want to talk about who they lost and honor them that way and bring them to life
Yeah.
and talk about their relationship with them. I mean, that's some people are afraid to address that. They think that, oh, I'm going to upset them or something. It's usually the opposite. Please ask me about these people. Yeah.
That's the whole premise of Science of Grief. It's like, ask me about the person that I lost. I want to talk to you about my brother. Like, that's what it is. You just need to create a space where people talk about what it is that they're going through. And I think with Rich, it's like, again, I could make up a million questions, but maybe tonight is just about my night last night and how I feel about somebody listening to me, even though you would think that I'm an expert and I could talk about my brother all night, but y'all are listening to me talk about my brother. And that means so much to me. I don't want to make up questions. I have a million questions, but I want to make them up.
Well, you're the expert on your own experience, you see.
I said that.
Yep. You're the expert on you and your experience.
I said that like 2 weeks ago. I did a show at Shinola like Hotel. And I said, we're not experts, but we are the experts of our own story and our own experience. My experience is just say their name. That's a poem to my brother. It's just me losing my brother. I'm not an expert. I'm just a person who lost somebody. And I just talk about it all the time.
And here's another thought I had that kind of gets at that, I think. And that is when people go through these kinds of experiences, at first, they're not interested in any kind of growth. They're just interested in survival. I mean, it feels so horrible that you
Yeah.
just want to figure out if you can continue to live, you know?
Yeah. You just get through it. You're just getting through it. But then there's this point of like, oh, I'm not only getting through it, it actually contributes to how I'm becoming a bigger and better human in the world. That's where I'm at now. Like, I was just getting through it three years in. Now I'm just better. Now I have the Science of Grief. Now I get to have these conversations. Now I get to write a book. It's like, I'm so much better, but I would not have this without my brother, who I feel like was a sacrifice for so many reasons. And my brother's death would have been his death with or without me. I don't control that. I know that would have happened, but he put me in a position to say, there's something else on the other side. And you are on the other side.
And Rich, the things you were talking about, right? These 5 ways, this idea of acts of service related to, if we do acts of service related to our trauma, that helps us. And Natasha, one thing I didn't mention, and you've mentioned it a couple of times, maybe you'd share a little bit about the science of grief, because this is something, you've not only transformed your experience and your love in this relationship into poetry, physical poetry with words, but you've done it in another way that I just think it would be really interesting for folks to know about, because it's even taken shape in other beautiful ways.
Yeah. Outside of my podcast that's on NPR, Science of Grief, I do a show every year that's a 14-hour show that's literally from 7 p.m. to 9 a.m. where people just come and talk about how they've experienced grief in their life over like some loss that they've experienced. And that came to me at like 3 a.m. in the morning, laying next to like somebody who loved me. And I was like, I don't want to wake this person up and tell them how sad I am over the loss of my brother. And then I woke up the next morning and was like, but what if you do a 24-hour show? And now it's the most prominent thing in my life and the most prominent thing in like my actual job. Every year we plan for Science of Grief, where people come and say, I am grieving. But as a Black woman in the middle of Detroit, we don't talk about grief. I was one of the first people in my family to say, I'm hurt. And now it's like on NPR, and now I've got to perform in front of Mumford & Sons, and now I got to say my brother's name in front of rooms I could never imagine that I would be able to just say his name. And now, again, 5 years from now, the Science of Grief is one of the biggest things that's ever happened to me. But it's all because I lost my brother. But it's not about my brother anymore. That was the year 1 and year 2. Now it's about other people who lost their brothers, their grandmothers, their cousins, their friends. Like, it's so different. And that's where post-traumatic like growth comes in. Like, oh, if I never experienced this thing, other people would never be able to experience me in the thing and deal with what they're dealing with. Because me, if my brother would have died, I feel like I would be able to get over it after 7 years. But some people, they're not like me and Rich. They can't like analyze and think their way through things. I'm a Capricorn, so everything is about logic. My brother's Capricorn. I can logistically get my way through anything. I don't almost have feelings until I lost my brother. And I said, oh, you feel something right now. You feel it. And I created this 14-hour show. And now we're four years in.
Well, in this chat above, I see people, are using the term hero to describe you, Natasha. And I think that's accurate, because before you hopped on, Rich was sharing what hero means and what the real definition of hero is in our culture, or at least what it should be, which is our ability to look inward and then to be able to share these experiences. And you're a hero of your story, but I think also, and so being that hero, you're also a hero for so many other people in the work you're doing. And Rich, honestly, as well, for your commitment to this topic. I'm sure, and I didn't ask you a personal question, but it sounds like you had losses that I'm sure. Maybe I'll just ask you, as have your own losses informed you're a researcher, but you're not a machine. Have your own losses informed this work that you're doing?
Well, they have, but I guess in a kind of a backwards way, after I started getting more and more into this kind of work, it made me reflect more on my own losses and my own personal experience and see some of that in a different light. Around the same time I was developing this work on post-traumatic growth, I started working for a nonprofit that served bereaved families, and I spent 25 years sitting in weekly support groups with bereaved parents, groups of parents who lost their kids. And 25 years of doing that every week, hearing stories, it'll teach you some stuff, I'll tell you. And it made me reflect back on some things. And it made me bring to bear some of my own experiences. So for example, if a parent said, I'm afraid my child will be forgotten, I could say truthfully, I'll tell you, I remember my girlfriend from when I was 18. I've never forgotten her, and I'd like her parents to know that she's remembered. And when I remember her to her sister says, it is such a blessing to me, she says, to talk to someone else who knew Jenny and loved her, that we can share that. So, I can bring these things to bear from my own experience. And we could all do that. That's the whole point of this. We can all be expert companions like that. We can all be, to some degree, Natasha's, if we have the courage like she has to be able to speak out and make something of it. It's so helpful to everybody else around us.
So Natasha, with that, do you have one more poem you want to grace us with?
So before I go and end my show somewhere else, this truly, all these conversations truly are like a blessing to me. And Rich, I hope we keep in touch, because the science of grief is happening and happening and happening. And I'm so invested in the idea of what happens next. And I know that you're like, I would love to just talk to you about it. And everybody on this chat, I hope you understand that we're regular people dealing with regular grief. And thank you, Reimagine. I'm going to do a poem, and like I said, it's my third show tonight. But anything to help people through their grief is more important to me than anything else. So this is I Learned of Grief Too Late. And my book is Butcher. You can order it from me, Natasha T. Miller, on Instagram, Facebook, anywhere else. And you can also go to Button Poetry and order Butcher. So I learned that grief will humble you, that there's not enough success in the world to make you forget that your loved ones are dead. I've been an asshole to all of my friends since my brother died. There's a girl in Detroit that I hadn't talked to in 3 years prior to the night that he was murdered, and she still showed up to the crime scene before his body was removed from the concrete. She drank her liver into the darkest of holes and listened to the song Drunk in Love with Me for 56 days straight. And the first time I felt well enough to go outside sober and sleep in the dark alone again, I stopped answering her phone calls. If you're reading this, I'm sorry. Even though there's a really good excuse. I know sometimes we become the hunted and the hunter, the monster that we are running from and the monster that we are becoming. I know that your phone has been ringing nonstop since your overdose, since your mother passed, since your relapse, since your lover left, since the very moment it happened. And you've been hiding, and you've been hitting the ignore button, telling yourself that nobody cares about you. And I get it. Grief is much more contagious than joy. It seems easier to hand our baggage to the people we love than move through the world freely. It's a reason I left my mother at home to mourn the death of her only son alone while I went on the road to perform poems to strangers, because hurt people is so cliche but true. So you blame anything on the dead. You become the excuse and the excuse. I get it. The burning building and the fire, expecting to be rescued while left alone, until you're left alone, until you can no longer blame your behavior on your pain, until you have to be good to your friends again. And you send apologies years too late, until you hear someone you love for the first time say they can't forgive you. And you feel success and emptiness in the same body, until you are humbled, until you realize you are not the only one. We are all hurting. And as a result, we are all hurting each other, until you learn to be grieving and gracious, until you learn that this shit was never just about you. Thank you. I'm Natasha T. Miller. This is Butcher. I read a lot of poems about all the sadness that I have. Thank you, Reimagine. Thank you to the doctor, Richard. Thank you. Follow me. And this is amazing.
Hey,
Bring me anytime. Science of Grief.
we're definitely gonna follow you. So you'll be hearing footsteps.
I trust that. I trust that. But I have much more to offer when I don't have 3 shows in one night.
Well, I have a hard time imagining what that would look like at this juncture. But thank you so much, Natasha, and also thank you to Rich for being here. Both of you, honestly, this conversation and this experience was beyond, unplanned magic of just being together with people.
You're amazing. Thank you.
And so, if you out there want to show your gratitude in the chat for Richard and for Natasha, we'd appreciate that, just because both of you have been so incredible to grace us with your presence and your knowledge and your wisdom and your experience. Let's see, Rich, do you have any, do you want to offer one last, if you could offer one, whatever it's coming up for you, one last thing to the audience before I share what's next for us?
Well, that's not fair for me to have to say something after that beautiful poetic ending to this conversation. So I'll just turn it over to you with my heartfelt thanks for the experience.
Thank you, Rich. Thank you so much. And with that, this has been an episode of Phoenix Rising, our 5-part Reimagine series exploring what it means to emerge from the ashes. It's been a terrific session, honestly. It's blown my mind. And we asked this at the beginning of the experience: how might you channel grief into action and growth? What's one small, sweet step for you? Maybe it's something that came up for you that you can commit to, that you want to try to commit to. And we have a survey that Andy will drop in the chat right now for you to fill out what that small, sweet step might be for you. And we then will, in a couple of weeks, follow back with you and share what you shared with us for you to recollect and check it back in with yourself around how that sweet step is going for you. And so we encourage you to do that for yourself. Andy, do you want to share a little bit about our next part 4 of 5? That will be 80% of the way done.
Sure, Brad. Rich and Natasha, thank you for being our expert companions and our teachers tonight. The next Phoenix Rising program features some more artists and more psychologists. We have Dr. Amy Robbins, who will be co-facilitating a conversation with Brad, with 3 amazing people who have transformed their traumas and losses. You can register for that on letsreimagine.org. Next step. Also, we want to hear more from you. We know that you have your stories to share, and part of this growth is sharing those stories. So come join us on Friday. Dara Cosberg and I will be hosting a conversation where we can talk more about Natasha's poetry, Rich's theories on post-traumatic growth, and for you all to break up into small groups and to have these conversations with one another. So join us for that on Friday. Also at letsreimagine.org, you can register for that.
Thanks, Andy. And so with that, you know, I know we're a couple minutes late, but I again feel like this was just a perfect experience, at least for me to have the opportunity to meet Rich in this way, and then to hear from Natasha and the way that she shared and the conversation they both had with one another, and that you all participated in with your wonderful questions and participation that makes us want to do this, to have folks to engage with this work together in. And so, you know, that's the work that Rich described that we want to do as a community, that we want to help create that virtuous cycle of uplifting one another and being the safe support to share our stories and to elevate our culture from, you know, starting with each other. And then it can be a virtuous cycle of transformation and growth. And honestly, something, you know, I know there's this idea of toxic positivity, but I do think we want to create a more positive world in some ways, but do it in an authentic way that still holds space for grief along the path. And so with that, thank you again, Rich. Thank you again to all of you. I think what we'll do to end this session today is we'll unmute, and why don't we go out with the word love all together in harmony, a perfect 3-part, well, maybe 48-part harmony. So let's unmute and end it with a chorus of love. Love, love, love. You can unmute yourself, I guess, if I'm not the only one singing love, unless it's not possible. Is it possible? Love. Oh, now I'm feeling awkward being the only one. Although sometimes that's how it is in love. You're just the only one feeling it, and it's okay to express it. I feel a lot of love. And when there's an opportunity, Andy, can folks unmute or no?
I've asked everyone to unmute.
All right, love.
Love.